Blaze TV subscribers, welcome to a special podcast with Tucker Carlson. How are you, sir?
See you. I'm great.
Great to
Thank
see
you for having me.
Have we, besides one Facebook meeting, have we sat in the same room together?
I don't know, but I've been such a almost like scary stalker level admirer for so long that it feels like, no, I'm serious. I had dinner last night with some people you know, and I said and I meant it. I think you're, and I've always thought this, since you blew up CNN when I worked there, you're, the level of natural talent on display when you speak on camera is like unbelievable, and I know because I've done the job.
Yeah.
So I'm very impressed.
Likewise, I'm a mutual fan. You have, I think, and I've said this over and over again, I think you are the only one that was on national television up until recently that was telling the truth. That and not
well, that wasn't hard.
But it wasn't that you were, you were trying to get it right. And I don't think that happens very much. I don't think
I don't even have very interesting views on anything. You know, I really don't. I don't think I have a single radical or crazy or far out view on anything. I just have like 1985 views. So I'm like a very moderate 1985 voter, which is all of a sudden like crazy.
I know. You were talking today, I believe it was to Nikki Haley. You say you don't have any crazy views. However, you said something that I absolutely believe, and it is crazy to say it now. I think we absolutely blew up the Nord Stream pipeline.
Well, of course we did.
Yeah, absolutely did.
Well, yeah, and I think it's a big deal. I mean, on many levels, it was an environmental catastrophe. I mean, like a profound environmental catastrophe. It's also an act of vandalism, which I'm against. You should build things, not destroy them.
Yeah.
It was also an attack on infrastructure. And more than anything, it was an attack on our closest NATO ally, Germany, which used that pipeline to fund its entire manufacturing center. We just attacked our ally.
I know.
This is insane behavior. And I don't know why no one's been held accountable. Yes, we did it, whether it was through Poland or Norway. A NATO nation did it with our assistance and approval, and like everyone knows it, and everyone's afraid to say so. Why? I don't know why.
Can you say that?
Well, I just did.
Well, no, but I mean,
I'm unemployed. I can say whatever I want.
I mean, what are the ramifications of? Thank God that Russia has not retaliated. This is the biggest. This is the worst act of war I have ever seen us make, right? So,
and it's crazy. It's the kind of like late stage hubris on display with people.
It's all of it.
It really is. Like, I'm God. I can do whatever I want. There are no consequences. The rules don't apply to me. And when you adopt that attitude, when there's no humility at all or long-term thinking, this is, people who don't have like a stake in the future, like 80-year-old presidents, they just don't care. And when they start to behave like that, you can actually wreck the whole thing. You can take a country down doing stuff like that, in my opinion.
You know, you spoke today about humility, and that is the biggest thing. And I thought, just last month, everywhere. I was over in the United Kingdom, and I'm seeing pride flags, on Buckingham Palace. Everywhere there was pride flags.
Yeah.
Everywhere. And I thought, isn't pride a deadly sin? I mean, July should be Humility Month. If we've got a Pride Month, we have a problem. We will not humble ourselves.
I was in the UK last week. This is so weird that you said that. I thought the exact same thing. And I thought, I don't think I've ever made a bad decision that wasn't rooted in pride and hubris. Right. I mean, I'm not even talking about any sexual issue. I just mean as a matter of fact and lived experience, like every bad thing I've ever done was
lack of humility.
In that. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yes, it's insane. And it's so funny how people kind of say the truth out loud and no one recognizes it. We're celebrating pride. No, we should never celebrate human pride. Ever. Ever. It's a sin, but it's a sin because it leads to destruction.
Yeah. So I was thinking today, as I was listening to you open up this conference, and you were talking about reading the Bible and everything else, and I thought, I think Tucker and I might be the two people in the media, same media organization, that may have been extraordinarily unpopular in that building because we both talked about God.
Yeah.
I was told by Roger Ailes You are not to use the word God anymore.
Whoa.
A month later, he called me in and he said, do you know how many times you've said the word God? Do you remember our conversation? I said, yes, I do. And he said, you know how many times you've used it? I said, you counted? He said, yes, 92 times you have said the word God. I said, yeah, it's kind of important. I think, did you go through the same thing? You are on this God
Well, it's
trail?
kind of hard to imagine. I mean, I have the least threatening theology of I don't even have a theology. You know what I mean? I don't pretend to know the truth about anything. I'm just like noting obvious observations, and one of them is there's no rational explanation for some of this behavior, so maybe external forces are acting on people in ways that don't serve anyone's interest but are just pure darkness. And that is very, very obvious to me. I never pretend to be any kind of prophet. I'm the opposite of that.
Right.
And so I just don't see my views as threatening in the slightest. I'm like the dumbest person in the room being like, wow, what is that? I mean, that's as far as I go. That's all I'm qualified to do. And so I can't imagine anyone could be threatened by that. But if anyone is threatened by that, that reveals a lot more about them than it does about me.
Right.
Because I'm not calling anyone to a tent revival or telling anyone to be baptized in my blood or anything like. I'm like the opposite of that. I'm a fallen Episcopalian who knows he has no moral standing to judge other people, and I really mean that too. So, I have no idea. I personally think they were great to me when I worked there. They let me say whatever I wanted. I took that and ran with it. Obviously, I ran too far. I kind of sensed in my gut at some point, if you come out against the war in Ukraine and, they're probably going to punish you at a certain point. And then it came and I wasn't mad about it and I wasn't shocked by it. I mean, I was a little surprised in the moment, but I wasn't like, I can't believe they fired me. I was like, yeah. What did you expect? It's sort of like your own death. I mean, not being hyperbolic, but like at some point you're going to be, the doctor's going to be like, sit down.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, yeah, okay. Here it is. And you're going to be shocked and sad, and you call your wife and kids, and you cry and all that stuff, but are you really like, I can't believe I'm dying?
Right.
I just can't believe it. Nobody told me.
I've been smoking my whole life.
Right, or I've been living my whole life.
Yeah, right.
I thought I was going to live forever.
Right.
So you can't be mad or shocked.
Sure. Have you heard the
Sorry,
news?
that was super dark.
No. Have you heard the dark to me? No.
Glenn Beck's like, dark for me.
Did you hear the news today about you?
Probably not.
Tucker Carlson's remaining team at Fox News, 9 employees, are going to be frog-marched out of the building at 9 p.m. tonight. HR will be waiting outside of the control room when they finish tonight's show to escort the remaining producers outside. One producer called it degrading.
That is, and this is certainly not a defense of the company that's doing that, but this is kind of par in corporate America. I think it's disgusting. And I would say 2 things. One, you should always be loyal to people who are loyal to you. Loyalty is reciprocal. If people give up a lot on your behalf, you should do the same for them. And I've never seen a publicly traded company, do that for anybody in the United States. And it's disgusting, okay? I think it's a huge sin that they all commit. The second thing I would say is that I'm 54, so I joined the workforce when there were no HR departments. It was called personnel, and it had a minor role in the life of the company. And the job was to sign you up for your dumb healthcare benefits or take out FICA or something like that. HR evolved on the promise that it would meet the needs of humans, human resources. It has made companies far more soulless, far crueler to people,
big time,
far more at the mercy of lawyers and the grotesque anti-human legal mindset that's really hurt our country, that's stripped the humanity from people and turned them into widgets. HR is an instrument of cruelty and force and coercion. And I think anyone who's working in HR should examine his own conscience and ask, can I continue to do this? I really think it's a bad force in America. And nobody says that, but it's true. I've seen it. And
I've seen it.
Yes, it's horrible.
We all have seen it. You've seen it when you see it yourself when you're marched into an office and you see the HR people and then you see the attorneys behind and you're like, this is really not necessary. Why can't we just...
I had one conversation with HR my entire life and I said, I'm not talking to you at all. Because this person came into my office and said, you're not allowed to talk to another employee about something. This person had complained about me. So I saw the person, I'd never met the person, and filed a complaint saying, that I hurt his feelings or made him feel unsafe because of my opinion. So I run into him and I said, hey, here's my cell. Call me, text me. Like, if you got a problem, call me. Because it is a moral requirement that we take our complaints to one another directly as human beings, not through mediating structures. That's like actually a biblical command, as you know. So anyway, but it's also a human command and a human requirement. So I do this, and the HR lady comes in and she's like, you're not allowed to do that. And I said, I'm an adult man and a father and a taxpayer. You are not allowed to tell me who I can speak to. And then I use bad language. Because I mean it. You can't tell me who I can talk. Well, you're my mom now? What are you, God?
Right.
You're telling me who I can talk to? Get out of my office. And I said that. I'm sorry I was rude, but I felt that was such an intrusion. I mean, I couldn't even believe someone would say something like that. Telling you who you can talk to? Who do you think you're talking to? Like I'm 9 or something? And that was the last conversation I will ever have with HR. And if there's nothing else I achieve in my life, that I am proud of. I will never speak to an HR department again. Period.
I will tell you, it was scary when I left. Everybody said I was crazy because we had buffering when I left. You remember buffering problems?
No.
You don't remember?
Oh, buffering like tech.
Yeah,
buffering.
tech.
Yeah.
You would be buffering and you'd be like, okay. So you'd be like, tonight I'm going to tell. Nobody wanted to watch anything online at that time.
Man, you were the first to go digital. I think you were the first person I knew.
Yeah. So the thing now is that you are going to love, and you probably already are, is freedom. I feel like Braveheart. Freedom! You have no boss. You only answer to yourself and to God and your audience. And people in New York and all the big media centers, they have no idea what freedom feels like.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Well, I got to be honest, I actually have felt that way for the 14 years I've been at Fox. No one ever bothered me, and I was off in like my own world doing, and I would get like reports back that like everyone thinks you're crazy on January 6th. It was a racist insurrection, and I was like, I don't think it was. But no one ever said anything to me directly about it. No one ever said anything to me.
Right.
And so again, there was no kind of lead up to this. Like, if you say one more thing about January 6th, it was like, you're great. Next day, bye-bye.
Did you say everything about January 6th that you wanted to say?
I said everything that I know.
Okay.
I have a lot of views on it. I have some ideas that are speculation that I probably wouldn't articulate because I don't want to say what I don't know. I do know there were a lot of federal agents in the crowd. Maybe there was a good reason for that. What would it be? I don't understand how you could have that many federal agents in the crowd and then it gets completely out of control at exactly the moment that the Capitol Police, which are in charge of security, were prevented from knowing any of the intelligence. Like, maybe this is a series of accidents, but why don't you just calmly explain to me how that happened? But no one will. Shut up! I'm not going to shut up.
There's too many series of accidents. You can't.
Yes.
You can be accident prone. And believe me, with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, I can understand accidents happening. But you can't continue to have accident after accident, and they all fall in one direction.
Yes, and then you use the result to strip people of their constitutionally guaranteed civil liberties, and to tell a tapestry of lies that changes American society. That this was worse than Pearl Harbor or 9/11, like, you're a liar.
Yeah.
And anyone who says you're a liar is attacked. What? It's like so many, like, when they're lying when they overstate something to a grotesque degree and then scream at anyone who asks any questions about it. And
I remember the first time.
It should make you nervous when they act like that.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I remember when I was on Fox and Friends and I said stupidly, just off the top of my head, still just like, I don't know, I'm just thinking things out loud. And I said, I think Barack Obama's a racist.
You were totally right, and I agreed with you 100%. And they hated you for that.
Right. But what I said was, no, that's not quite right. I followed it immediately. That's not quite right. He just seems to have some deep-seated problem or hatred for the American culture or white people. And I didn't understand at the time. It's CRT. It's all of the stuff that we're dealing with right
completely
now.
true.
Yes, it is.
But when
it
they
is.
freak out, I mean, so you could, okay, so you hear Glenn Beck say that. I think Obama may be a racist. Maybe he's got a problem with white people. He had this sort of weird,
Yeah.
complex childhood.
But we didn't know any of that stuff
Exactly.
then.
So you could say, well, I disagree with you. That's not what they said.
No.
They said Glenn Beck must be taken off the air immediately. And in their response, I saw a precursor to what we see now with the vax, with
All of it.
with January 6th, with climate change, with any, you know what their big programs are. You know what the truth is when they become completely hysterical
Right.
at your opinion.
Right.
And let me just say again, definitively, I agreed with you at the time. I knew you were right. In fact, I thought it was very insightful what you said. And the sad thing was, a lot of really decent people, including a lot of Republicans, voted for Obama because they thought it would bring racial healing. And I understood that. I was like, I didn't vote for him, but I was like, that's a good reason, to vote for him.
Yeah.
But the irony was, he was completely committed to a racist agenda that was motivated by hate. And it's very obvious now.
I have to tell you, I walked back to my office at my building because I didn't have my offices at Fox. I separated myself.
I remember.
Yeah. And I walked
Mercury
back.
Radio?
Yeah, arts. Yeah. And I'm walking back to my office, and I get back, and everyone on my staff is just like, and I said, what? They said, what?
You said the forbidden thing.
I know.
You told the truth.
What? And I said, well, what? And they said, what you just said. And I said, what did I say? It was so logical to me that you could make the case. And I really thought, Tucker, and I don't know if there was a turning point with you. There was with me when I realized, oh my gosh, none of these people in the media actually care or are intellectually curious at all. They're just typing away, doing their thing, reading a prompter. Nobody is actually, because I really thought if I could make the case, which you did, every night you were making a great solid case. And if you are intellectually curious and you disagree, you go, well, that can't be right. Let me look it up. Let's do some investigative work on what he just said. They don't do that. And that shocked me.
But then you have to wonder why. So it's like no one in Washington or in the media is ever outraged by a lie. So I can come out here and tell the most preposterous lies, say the most lunatic things. Climate, you're driving a Suburban is causing more hurricanes in Florida. Well, they say that every fall.
Right.
And it's like insane. There's no evidence that that's true. There's a ton that's evidence that's not true. Nobody cares. But when you say something true, that's actually true, deeply true, people become hysterical and call for your murder, and certainly call for your deplatforming. So then, what conclusion do you reach? The media are completely determined to suppress the true things that matter. That's kind of why they exist. They are the gatekeepers that prevent people from saying out loud the truest things.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. Do they know it, and they're just part of it because they think their agenda is so right? Is there a way to do they ever wake up, or is this who they are?
Well, the people who are currently in the system, I mean, I was in the system for 32 years, and I don't think there's any evidence that people are having like road to Damascus convert. Like, I've worked on Good Morning America for 11 years. I can't believe how many lies I told.
Right.
Or how much truth I suppressed. Like, that's probably not going to happen. But
people sometimes do things, and they do have that. I mean, road to Damascus. Paul woke up and said, oh my gosh, he thought he was right.
Yes.
Okay? So there's a lot of people that might think that they're right. Let me change it from the press.
You have to knock it down with a lightning bolt.
Yeah, right. But let me change that. Do the American people, the Democrats, our neighbors, not the crazies, the neighbors that have always been, if I went back in a time machine just 10 years ago and said, hey, see that guy in a dress? That's a woman. And you're going to say he's a good-looking woman, too. And they would say, no. And I want you to know that woman, that man, who you're going to claim is beautiful and a woman, is going to do a striptease show in your third grade class. They would all say, no way. No way, that's wrong. We knew that 10 years ago. What has happened to them? Do they ever wake up? Are they so deep down the rabbit hole they're not listening to themselves? What's happening?
They're terrified. I mean, there's this scene at the end of 1984 where Winston Smith, who's the protagonist, finally gets betrayed, right? And he winds up in the basement of the Ministry of Truth, and they torture him. And what they're trying to make him do is pretend that something he knows is not true is true. Now, why is that? Why not just kill him? Because it's easy to kill people. But the true test of omnipotence is to control someone's mind. And so Stalin did the same. Kamenev, Zinoviev, he killed them all, but before he killed them, he made them read fake confessions of their crimes against him. Why even bother? Why not just kill them? Because that was a sign that he controlled them as people, that they had no free will, that they were purely puppets of him. And I think that's exactly what the trans thing is about. You think the people promoting this stuff care how many trans kids kill themselves after having their brains destroyed by testosterone injections? They don't care.
I think they are. This is so anti-human. The whole thing is so anti-human. It's crazy.
You might almost think they're like larger forces at play.
Let me do some rapid fire questions.
Hit me with it, baby.
Okay, here we go. When you got up this morning, did you imagine that you would see not one, but two presidential candidates light themselves on fire in front of you?
When I get up this morning, as every morning when I wake up, I don't imagine anything.
Right.
I haven't had a drink in 21 years, and every single morning I wake up hungover. I feel like I've had a quart of Stoli and a six-pack of some rotten beer. I just feel horrible in the morning, every morning. And so I put my pants on, I shuffled downstairs and got coffee, and so I didn't think about it at all until I was seated across from Senator Scott, who was the first. And I really like them all. Like, politicians are super charming. Like, they're good with people. That's why they're in this business. So I like all of them. But no, I do think that Republican voters, or the system controlled by the Republican Party, doesn't ask a lot of its candidates. It's like enough to repeat certain bumper stickers from the 80s, peace through strength, lower taxes, whatever.
Right.
I'm for all that, by the way. But they don't, like, no one ever gets pushed very hard.
Right.
And so it doesn't take much. I was certainly not acting out of hostility, but if you're just like, well, what do you mean? Get into the question. And then people's like, oh, you're so mean. Really? You're trying to run my country.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I live here. I have 4 children. I can't go anywhere. Like, what do you mean? You're trying to run the country, and you're mad that I'm like trying to get you to be more precise about your answers that you should have memorized already?
Right.
Because you're presuming to represent me? I get a little annoyed if I think about it that way.
I will tell you, I was watching you. We were covering it on The Blaze, and I'm watching you, and I'm thinking, how does a member of the press look at this? Because some people would say, look, he's got an agenda. But you didn't. Your agenda was, I want to understand how you square this circle, because it doesn't work. That doesn't happen. That's, again, intellectual curiosity from a member of the press.
Yeah, but I'm a middling IQ character. Like, I am no genius. So if I guess really, if that's considered remarkable, it's a commentary on how just completely corrupt and stupid everybody else in this job is. Because like, why is that hard? You know, you ask Asa Hutchinson, like, you're defending, giving hormones to kids as treatment. He's like, well, I'm not defending it. Really? I think you are. Like that's not exactly like F. Lee Bailey cross-examination. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not an OJ lawyer. It's pretty simple.
Oh man, that was, I felt bad because I laughed out loud a couple of times when they answered your question, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're serious.
Oh, it was an audience of super nice people.
Yeah, very nice.
And obviously, I'm kind of a jerk on some level, and so I did definitely tone it down, but a couple of times, the Mike Pence religious freedom stuff, I have to say, spun me up. It did. You can't be like, well, I'm for religious freedom, except for like priests who say things the government disagrees with, they can be arrested. huh? You know, and it'd be fine if it was almost any, and I'm holding him to an unfair standard, but if you hold yourself up as a Christian leader who's in favor of religious freedom, well, then you kind of have to defend religious freedom, whether it's popular or not.
It's not, no freedom. Nobody has to defend my right to say, chocolate's delicious.
Yeah.
Okay? If it's popular, you have to, and I don't think even our side understands that. I was, when Bill Maher said, you know, I think the Saudi, or the hijackers were braver than our fighter pilots. I disagreed with that 100%.
Me too.
But when ABC fired him, I stood up for him and said, what part of politically incorrect don't you understand?
Good for you.
You have to stand for the things you personally find offensive. You know, one of the things that is missing in our society that I think we would solve so many of our problems. My father used to say, and I'll bet you everybody here heard this from their parents, or they said this to their kids at one point. Bob, I completely disagree with you, vehemently disagree with you. I cannot tell you how wrong I think you are. But I will fight right beside you, and I will fight to the death for your right to say it.
No, I think
doesn't happen anymore.
You're misremembering this. It's, I completely disagree with you, therefore I'm charging you with insurrection.
Oh, is that what it was?
Go back, yes.
Okay, all right.
Go back and check the videotape.
Okay, okay. All right, let's go through just quick rapid fire yes or no.
Got it.
Hunter Biden, does he go to jail?
Oh, yes, for many years. No.
Never.
Well, I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Joe Biden, does he get impeached?
He does not get impeached.
Does he pay any price for not the Hunter Biden stuff, the Hunter Biden China corruption?
Oh, he'll pay a price.
No, I don't mean.
Sorry.
I don't mean like Sister Uno. No. Sister Uno used to say to me, "Oh, they'll pay a price someday." I'm like, "No, sister, I want it now."
Oh, a vindictive nun. I love it. You know, I think it's very possible that he's not the Democratic nominee. I mean, I just don't see how this continues. And I must say, his wife, like, what is that?
This goes to my next question.
What is that?
My next question. Is the Biden, look at my notes.
No, I can't even, I don't have my glasses on. I can't read them.
Is the Biden family engaged in elder abuse?
Well, it's disgusting.
It is.
And yes, and I have knowledge of this actually. And Biden's sister said to someone I know, during the primaries in 2015 and 16, he's slipping. And she was distressed by it. She loves him. And the Biden family is close, actually, in some ways. That's real. And they knew, of course, his makeup hurt. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot about it. And the people around Biden knew that he was suffering the effects of cognitive decline during the Democratic primaries. And he was sad because his son, Beau, died of cancer, which I completely understand. And he wanted to get out on the road to kind of get it out of his system because that's what he does. He's campaigned his whole life. I get it. But then, because of a bunch of other events he had nothing to do with the Democratic Party, he's like, who do we pick? We thought it was Buttigieg, but he's obviously repulsive and incompetent. Biden doesn't seem very threatening. Let's just make him the puppet. I understand what happened.
I do too.
But I do think that his wife, Dr. Jill, should have said, it's my husband. Like, no, I'm not going to. My wife would have been like, no.
Anyone who loves a father, a brother, anybody would have said, stop it. I mean, even if you don't say it for the individual, say you're a brother that has a falling out, but you still respect him. My gosh, we took the keys to my grandfather's truck away from him when he couldn't drive. Then we had to take the keys from the riding lawnmower when he was on the freeway. At some point, Grandpa, we love you.
Right.
You can't do this anymore. It shows that they don't respect the family and they don't respect the country.
It's disgusting and disloyal. I have a senile dog and we would never treat her like that. I mean it. I love my dog. I really love my dog. And I would never treat her like that,
Feel free to skip this question. Who is Ray Epps?
Well, Ray Epps, by his own description, is one of the people who orchestrated the assault on the Capitol on January 6th, but who is now being defended by the entire left. Not described as an insurrectionist, but as some sort of victim of me. So, you know, I'll let you reach your own conclusions on that. But why would he be represented by a lawyer who worked for David Brock? That's a little weird, no? Mm-hmm. I mean, I thought we were against insurrections. The one guy who's on videotape saying, "To the Capitol," is the one guy they're like, no, we need to pay for a lawyer for this guy. Huh? When they're like diabetic grandmothers in D.C. jail 2 years later? Yeah. Like what? I mean, I can only speculate, which I will not do.
So you have just about everybody suing you. I think he's about to sue you. I might sue you after this just to be part of the crowd.
Of course, make it a class action.
Right. I was, and I can't talk about it at this point, but I will be talking about it most likely at some point in Congress. But I am currently financing somebody who absolutely cannot afford to take a case against the United States of America, and they are doing it to squeeze this individual. I can't tell you any of the details, but I talked to him yesterday, and he said, I don't know what to do. I'm helping him pay for that. Well, and I said, I can't imagine he's a regular American. I have the ability, but if they took me on, or the way they're taking you on, can we help you with crowdfunding for attorneys?
You're so nice. No, I don't know that I need it, but I do think the degree to which the justice system has been subverted by political actors to crush dissent, to punish challengers. They indicted the Republican frontrunner on nonsense charges. They've been telling me for 6 years that the guy's a felon and a criminal and a war criminal. Okay, that's totally fine. I mean, look, I'm not related. I don't work for Trump.
Right.
And if he's a war criminal, just tell me how. And if you can convince me, I'll join you in denouncing him. And in the end, they're like, he kept documents too long and something.
I actually said this
to
him.
It's like totally third world. Like what?
I said this to him maybe 6 months ago. I said, Mr. President, I lived in New York when you were building all of these hotels on the West Side Highway. Remember that? And your hotels would just go.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, he's got to have mob connections.
100%.
It's New York,
I expected them to find his, like, they buried all these bodies, the metal hands with the Gambino.
Yes.
You know, he's got like an army of child slaves working in the casino. Like,
Now he has been investigated.
A documents charge?
Right. He's been investigated by every intelligence agency on Earth. He is probably the most investigated man in history.
It's so disappointing in the tax returns. Like, actually, he lost money being president.
Right.
What a letdown.
He is so incredibly
It's like finding out UFOs are a Frisbee. Like, what?
Yeah.
That's it?
It's crazy.
The Loch Ness Monster is a bath toy? It's like, it's so disappointing. You know?
Especially when we paid for all of it. Yes or no? Do we stop the deep state? Is that possible? From what you heard today from the candidates, do you see anybody that can stop the deep state?
I mean, I don't want to seem like crazy or realistic or whatever you want to call it. Pretty tough. It's pretty tough. I mean, look, there's a lot of power vested in the federal agencies. There's no oversight at all. The Congress provides no oversight at all. The intel committees do not oversee the intel agencies. They're controlled by the intel agencies. Yes. I know the people who serve on them. That's true. Does Mike McCall offer like a backstop against the agencies? He's a pawn of the agencies. Are you joking? They all are. So I think it's very hard.
Does AI make it nearly inevitable that everyone on Earth loses privacy and personal protections?
Of course. Yes. At best. There's no privacy. And speaking of the Gambinos, Carlo Gambino had it right. When he had something important to say, he went behind the liquor store. And it's just true. Your phone is a surveillance device being used or potentially used against you. So if it's in your, and by the way, anybody who deals with intel, I'm not one of them, I'm just like a talk show host, but occasionally you deal with someone who deals with intelligence in that world, boy, they don't have a cell phone anywhere near them.
So Chertoff, you remember Michael Chertoff?
Very well, I know.
So he was DHS. This is 2005. He comes into my radio studio and I said, please turn off your cell phone, it affects the equipment. And he said, I don't have a cell phone.
Right, exactly.
And I said, you don't have a cell phone? And he said, no. And if people understood what can be done with cell phones, no one would have a cell phone.
That's totally right.
That was 2006. Imagine what we have now.
It's totally true. And people are so, like, if you're doing anything naughty on the internet, you're an idiot. Why? I'm serious. Like, do nothing naughty on the internet, ever.
Do nothing naughty. I mean
we're
at a
nothing
point.
you'd be ashamed of should take place on the internet. And this idea that there are like certain apps that are secured, you really? No, that is not the way you are surveilled. Your phone is taken control of, and everything that passes through your phone, every image on your phone is recorded. So like, I'm on Signal, no one can read it. Okay.
You're right.
Okay, son. No, I mean, that's just a fact. I'm distressed by it. But then on the other hand, I mean, I've already had all my texts grabbed, and they're already in the New York Times. So as I said to my wife, like, yeah, it's embarrassing. I use bad language. I think you'd heard that after 32 years, but I'm not having an affair. You know that now.
I will tell you that. I will tell you that. I said at one point on the air that alcoholics may be the ones that save America. Recovering alcoholics.
That's
recovering
right.
alcoholics.
I'm with you, baby.
Because they've already gotten it all out.
100%.
They've all said it. They've been broken. They're not hiding anything anymore.
Totally agree with that.
And if you're not hiding anything, it gives you such power. Somebody said to me.
That is so true.
Somebody said to me at one point, well, I'll just tell you, it was Roger Ailes. He called me into his office at one point, and he came in with a stack of papers, and they were investigating me. I'd been investigated. You know all this.
Yeah.
You do what you do, and you get investigated by everybody, both sides, all sides. And I knew I was completely clean. And he came, I sat down at his desk. He said he wanted to talk to me, and he set a stack of papers down, and it was about that big. And he said, listen, people are looking into you. And I said, yep. And he said, so you have to be very careful. And I said, yes, sir, I know. And he said, so don't do anything. I said, no, sir, I'm clean. And he said, and he patted the top of the file. You have a wonderful wife. Oh my gosh, the hair stood up back in my neck, and I leaned into the desk and I said, yes, I do. And he said, it's always a shame. He almost petted it like he was like a supervillain and this was a little white cat. And he said, it's always a shame when somebody does something that hurts a woman like that. And I looked at him and I said, that, sir, is why it has never happened. And we had like a third grade stare down for like 45 seconds. Where he was just looking and reading me.
Are other businesses, does this happen in like the insurance business? It's just television,
It's
right?
just television.
Yeah, sure.
It was so bizarre, Tucker. And it is, when people really understand the power you have when I got nothing to hide. I got nothing.
Totally agree.
And when you're not bluffing, it freaks the other side out. They don't know what to do.
I agree. And I do think that, I hate the word recovery, but people who've been forced to face their own failings and realize the central insight of life and the root of all wisdom, which is, I am not God.
Yes.
You don't have to have a specific theology to realize that. You just have to be honest and aware and willing to face it. I am not God. And you definitely learn that. If you drink too much, if you party too much, as I did, like, there's no pretense like, well, actually, I kind of think I'm God. No. And that's a really good thing to learn. And I trust people like that. And it doesn't even have to be former drinkers or drug people.
No, it's just people who have.
Yeah, anyone who's been, whenever I know someone who's gone to prison, I always try to have a party for the person when he gets out, even if it's like a bad crime, because they're always improved by it. Like Jack Abramoff went to prison. I didn't even know him that well, but he got out. I'm not a lobbyist. I'm not in this business. I had a huge party for him at my house. My neighbors were outraged. How can you have Jack Abramoff in here? I was like, he went to prison. Like, he's out. Yeah. Like, I now respect him because he can no longer pose as a good person.
Correct.
And that is exactly where I am. I'm not pretending to be a good person.
I just painted a painting of Johnny Cash in jail, his mugshot.
The best.
And I called it Best Day of His Life. And people were just looking at it. I was just at an art gallery, and they were just looking at it, and they said, best day of his life. And I said, oh, everything's sunshine and lollipops after there. This broke him.
Yes.
So now he's humble enough. Everything, he will look back, and I'm sure he did, look back on that moment as, thank God that happened.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I really would recommend, in a much more low-grade way, getting fired. It's good for a man to be fired once.
It is. It is.
Because you can really start, especially if you're in the talking business, you can wake up and be like, it's possible I'm Jesus.
Yeah.
And you start thinking that,
Yeah.
it's not good. And
Yeah.
so getting fired and being humiliated and having people avert their gaze when you walk into the
You
restaurant.
don't learn anything. You learn some things when you're wildly successful.
I never learned anything.
But when you're broken, and
100%.
then that's
100%.
you hate it when it happens, but you always look back and go, best years of my
No,
life.
this time when it happens, the third time it's happened to me, my wife was like, first of all, I'm psyched. She was psyched. So that's good.
My wife
She's
would do
not
the
taking
same.
off like, oh, me and the pool boy are out of here.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that at all. But I was like immediately thankful for it. I was like, this is me good. Because if this had continued, oh, you're so important. At some point I'd be like, I really am.
Yeah. My wife is so unimpressed. We are lucky. We're lucky. My wife, we were invited to the White House, and then we were invited to, I think we were invited to go have dinner with President Trump in Florida. We were invited to the White House for another president, and she's like, really? I don't want to go.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
That's the spirit.
what? When we were invited to, she said, I mean,
Tell the Pope I'm busy.
I have
Sorry.
I mean, she is not impressed, which is the best thing. It's
the best.
for people like us.
Totally agree.
Okay, yes or no? Biden the most corrupt president in history?
It's hard to beat LBJ, honestly. When President Kennedy was killed in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, according to the Robert Caro biography, he was there, of course. The vice president, Lyndon Johnson, goes into the bathroom. He comes out and he's like, pretty clear he knew this was going to happen. And he was totally fine. So it's that's very, very dark. And this is Caro, who's like a liberal, whatever, liberal Democrat, no weird political agenda, or not anti-Johnson political agenda. It's really hard to beat Lyndon Johnson for like pure darkness.
Right.
But I think Biden is the tool of history-changing corruption. He's like low-grade, corrupt, like shyster used car guy. Like, oh, take a payoff from the insurance carriers or from the credit card companies. You can't discharge your credit card debt in bankruptcy now. It's like, buy me a house and I'm yours. But the kind of corruption that we're seeing now, like the true deep, where there's like looting the country.
Yeah.
Like making fake cryptocurrencies and running off to the Bahamas and like no one's ever punished. He is the tool of that. It's really changing our country.
While we're at JFK, they're obviously not covering for an individual anymore.
No, institutional.
This is institutional, and what are they afraid of? That we'll know what we already know? That they're completely corrupt? That these institutions...
Yes. That's right. I mean, look, it's so deep. A guy called Matthias Desmet wrote one of the most brilliant books I've ever read called The Psychology of Totalitarianism 2 years ago. He's a Dutch academic, but
everyone should read that.
Whoa!
It's really good. Yeah.
And but in it, he makes the point that institutions, by their nature, protect themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like it's the ant colony. They act. It's the beehive. They act on behalf of the whole. And it's intrinsic to people. You kind of can't get rid of it. All institutions are like this. In the end, self-perpetuation becomes the goal. And so it's kind of weird that you like rotate out of CIA after 20 years. No one working at CIA knew James Jesus Angleton, but all of them feel incumbent on them the burden of protecting the reputation of the agency. So that's what it is, I think.
Is there any news that comes from any network or any host? Like when you were on, I could say, check it, but I trust that's right. Do you watch any network and say...
Well, I don't have a TV, and I never have. And so I don't watch that stuff, and I don't think it's good for you. And we read in silence in my house and play backgammon, and I get all of my information from texts and conversations with people. And,
Good for you.
And I like that. I don't trust any of this stuff. I don't want it on my head. I don't want, it really matters. Like Sherlock Holmes, the Arthur Conan Doyle stories are really great. And Sherlock Holmes, once he was being asked, well, you didn't know that? And he's like, your mind is like an attic. Like there's limited space. You think it goes on forever, but you're crowding it with all kinds of broken furniture and you have no room for new stuff. And I thought it was so insightful. And so I try not to clutter my head with stuff that's untrue, that's stupid. I mean, I do anyway, of course, because I live here, but I try not to. So I haven't read the New York Times in many years. And the Washington Post, I wouldn't cross the street to read their stupid newspaper if it were free. I wouldn't.
This election, everybody always says, most important election ever. Is this the one that decides the freedom for the whole world?
I don't know. I mean, certainly it's important. I'm pretty distressed about the way it's going. I have a terrible track record of calling the outcomes of these things. I mean, terrible. I'm not going to predict anything ever again as long as I live. But I don't know that the battle is really at the ballot box. I mean, they seem to have it pretty well locked down. You start, mail-in ballots become the majority of votes, and like, let's be real. Electronic voting machines cannot be secured by their nature. I'm not accusing anyone of a crime. I'm just saying if you have electronic voting machines, you're not serious about voter integrity, period. And everyone knows that. So I don't know that this is winnable, but I'm not sure the real battles are won on election day. The real battles have to do with people's values and their priorities and what they think and their ability to be with like-minded people and all that. Like, once people's opinions change, then everything is downstream of that. And
so do you think people's opinions, like I hear people all the time say, I don't even listen anymore. I don't watch the news. I don't listen to all the crap out of Washington because, you know, I'm not interested. And I wonder if that is true, or they say, I don't care. And I think that they do care.
Yes.
They just don't think anything will come of it.
Yes.
So it's like the attic. Why put that furniture in there?
And it's so depressing. It's like you go on vacation with your family and you tune out for a week. I mean, this just happened to me. And you're like, do I really care? Like, it's so painful to dive back into American news coverage or to find out what's going on because it's all so screwed up. And you're like, I have a really happy family. I've got a ton of kids, a ton of dogs, great wife. Like, why am I even getting involved in this stuff? It just makes me mad.
But you can't.
Well, it's your moral obligation to participate in the moment that you live in. It's like not kind of your choice.
Yeah.
And running away from things is cowardly. And especially those of us who like do this for a living, like there's a reason we're here and you got to try your hardest and keep running the race. I really believe that. But I get why people tune out. They're like, this is awful.
Yeah.
This is awful.
And if you don't have a center,
it's not even rational.
No, it's not. And if you don't have a center in God, I mean, people will say to me all the time, where do you get your hope? And I'm like, God.
Yeah.
Because he's not uninterested. This is his freedom. These rights are not, I don't have a right.
Oh, I agree.
He gave me the right. Yeah. These are his rights, and I'm supposed to protect them. And he's not uninterested in this. You know, when they say the founders were all deists, really? Because they all talked about miracles that they saw. How is that a deist? He's involved in this.
And there's never been a society in human history, in all human history that we know of, that didn't believe that. That didn't believe there was a superior supernatural force acting on human affairs. Every society has believed that until our own. So this is like a 70-year-old phenomenon where we're living in a world where no one acknowledges the possibility that there are unseen forces at work. Everybody else has always believed that, no matter what the religion. You know, the polytheists of Athens believe that. Like we're living in an anomalous moment where people are like, no, it's science. Okay, it's science. You fools. And Les Jones says you really saw it at the beginning of COVID when we started covering COVID pretty early in like late January, February, just because we're interested in China. And it was sounding pretty scary, you know, and all the videos and everything. And like I thought it sounded scary as hell, and I said so on the air early on. But the reaction was like, people were so freaked out at the thought of dying. And I thought, well, that's, you know, no one wants to die. I totally get it. But like, if you really think that dying is the worst thing that could happen to you, I have contempt for you. Dying is not the worst thing first of all, dying's gonna happen to you. Okay, that's guaranteed, can't control it. Can't extend your life by a single day. That's a fact. But if you think that's the worst thing, no, that's a natural thing. The worst thing is living in a degraded manner like a slave. That's way worse than dying. Are you joking? And like, there was no conversation. We had one guy on the air, it was the lieutenant governor of Texas, said that on our show in a very reasonable, moderate way. He's like, no, I'm not that, you know, I'm an older man. I'm not that worried about dying, but I'm really worried about my grandkids. And he was like attacked for saying that.
I remember.
And I remember thinking, well, this society, the core problem is people are too afraid to die or even acknowledge that death exists.
Do you remember when
No wonder they're so neurotic.
I was attacked because I came out and said, look, I'm 58, 57 years old at the time, and somebody's got to keep the engine running.
Yes.
And we applauded at one point all of the Russian firefighters that ran into Chernobyl knowing they were going to die.
Exactly.
But I said, I don't mind if somebody has to die, but keep this thing running. I think there's a lot of Americans my age that will go, I'll do it.
Yeah, how many
so
more?
it can survive.
How many vacations do I need? Like, I totally agree with you. Do you know what I mean? Like, hang around to like go to the beach in St. Bart's and get an umbrella drink? Like, not that interesting, you know? None of it's that interesting. Leisure is not that interesting, actually, having just done it. It was fine, but not that interesting.
Let me leave you with this, and this would not be a serious question 15 years ago. Do you think there's a chance, and I know people say this all the time, forever they've said this, but do you think there's a chance that we are living in the times when we'll see Christ return in our life?
You know, people, we live in Maine for half the year, or more than half the year, and I work out of a barn in our tiny little town, which some local newspaper like ran a picture of it. So I have people at the barn every day. And I would say when I'm like sitting in there in my boxers, smoking a cigar, bang, 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 bang. And I'm dumb enough to answer the door. And I would say 100% of the time, it's someone there to tell me about the end times. And I always say the same thing, which is, I totally believe that's happening. I think that history does have an end. Okay, it's not a loop. It's a progression. It's linear. I believe that. I know that intuitively, and I believe it as a matter of faith. So I do think there's an end at some point. But for me to presume to call it, to know when it's coming, are you joking? Like, the number one sin is presuming you have powers that you don't, to put yourself in the position of the Creator, to pretend you're God, to mistake yourself for the Almighty. And for me to say, well, I'm pretty sure the end times are, really?
Yeah, I'm not.
Like a thief in the night.
Right.
You don't know. So, like, sure, it looks that way to me. But like, what do I know? I thought Lee Zeldin was going to be governor of New York. Okay, so I'm not good at predicting.
But I think that, well, no man will know. I totally agree, and I'm not saying that he is coming. I'm not saying that. But he did give us all of these clues to watch for, and I think it's to give us hope. When I actually started to think, because I've been doing this for a while, where my world gets very dark, and as I... Are
you Scandinavian?
No.
You must be.
And I'm looking at all of this, and my wife and I started really seriously considering just, everybody, the apostles did this. I think it could happen. I think it could happen. And I found myself going, wow, that would be really cool. What an honor, if it did happen, to live at this time. And I think he gave us some of these signs, not to say, yeah, buckle up, here we go, ride's going. He gave us, though, to say, when I come, you'll see these things. Have hope. It's going to be difficult, but I'm coming. And so it all works out. I gotcha. I think that's the message that so many people are missing right now.
Well, I believe that. I would just say
God saying, I gotcha.
One, no mainline Protestant church that I'm aware of allows its members to read Revelation. Like, you're not allowed to do that. You got to be like a full-on snake handling fundy to read that stuff. And so I'd never seen it, I hadn't. Not that I was biblically literate in any way.
Wow.
But I just read it. I read it last month. And my wife's like, ooh, that's a scary one. And it was pretty heavy, but I didn't find it scary at all. So that's the first thing. Like, it's actually worth kind of reading it. It's a slog, but it's super interesting, and I didn't find it scary. That's the first thing. Second thing I would say is, I have no idea, no freaking clue, as we say in Maine, what's going on right now. But I will say that my personal relationships with the people that I love and know have never been crisper and deeper and more rewarding to me. I've never felt more connected to the people around me. I've never felt more satisfied with my relationships. I have lost a lot of friendships because of political turmoil, but I've gained new ones that are even more rewarding. And I just feel like there's all this chaos and all this sadness, and everyone's so sad about it. But if you look at your own life and assess your own relationships, are they better and deeper and more honest? You may find that they are. And that's like a greater reward than anything. Like, I want America to be what it was in 1986, because I dug America in 1986. You could smoke on airplanes, and it was like fun. But
that's really not what comes to mind right off the top of my head.
That's the first thing that comes to my mind. The first thing that comes to my mind. And I missed that, just being honest. But anyway, you can't do that anymore. It'll never happen again.
Right.
But the upside is, it's a richer way to live. The intensity is actually good for the relationships between, because you know what matters, and you know the people you can trust, who you really care about. When you're saying your prayers, it's like a really clear list, like these people. And I love that.
Yeah. I feel I can say this because I know you understand humility. So I feel I can say this to you. I really believe it is a privilege to live at this time.
Yes.
And I'm privileged enough to be close enough to see and be in a position to be looking for these things. They pay me to do these things, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of people are just nose to the grindstone, just trying to squeeze out a buck.
Yes.
I'm doing that, you're doing that, but we get to see
Yeah,
bigger
it's a
pictures.
total privilege. I agree with that.
And it is a privilege to know you and to call you friend. I think it is, we all have a job to do. Martin Luther King was not the first guy that everybody looked at and said, hey, why don't you lead this? He was just the guy who would. And I said to my son one time, I asked him because he was struggling with something, and I said, why do I have, in my office, I have pictures of all of these great people who lived. And I said, why do I have these up here, son? And he said, because they were all heroes and they all had courage. And I said, no. Because they were all probably, at some point, I know, and I don't know how much, but I know at some point they were terrified of what they knew they had to do. But they did it anyway. Yeah. That's a hero to me. That's the people that generations, down the line, your family will say, let me tell you about my great-great-grandfather and what he did. He stood at those times. And I think your children, great-great-grandchildren, are going to have mighty stories to tell. And I thank you, and I know I'm not alone. I pray for you all the time.
Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless. Thank you. That was great. Thank you, guys. And they were all really flawed. All of them.